Good evening, friends. Let me start by saying this. The loudest work in your life should not come from your mouth. It should come from your results. You see, too many people want to be seen before they become. They want the platform before the preparation. But purpose doesn't show up at the sound of applause. It shows up when you're willing to build in silence. Today, I want to challenge you. Build yourself quietly. Don't confuse visibility with value. That's the trap of this modern world. We live in a culture that celebrates appearance over substance, noise over nuance, performance over process. But let me tell you something. What you practice in secret will either qualify or disqualify you in public. And here's the truth. Discipline in private is what opens doors in public. Most people want elevation without excavation. They want the reward without the routine. But the prize is never handed to those who only show up when the cameras are on. The prize is reserved for the ones who show up when no one's watching, when no one's clapping, when no one even knows they're there. Let's break it down. There's a difference between hustle and alignment. When you're aligned with your purpose, you don't wait for outside motivation. You operate from internal conviction. Motivation is good, but it's temporary. It's like a spark. Conviction, though, that's fire. That's fuel. That's what gets you out of bed at 4:30 IEMO when nobody is texting you, nobody is calling you, and nobody is checking for you. That's what makes you rehearse the pitch, study the material, sharpen your skills, and build your habits before the opportunity ever arrives. Discipline is not glamorous. And that's why it's rare. You won't get likes for it. You won't go viral for it. Nobody is posting videos of you turning off the TV to read a book. Nobody is clapping when you're saying no to the party, yes to the prayer closet, yes to the gym, yes to the late night grind. But that's where the future is formed. That's where greatness is forged. You want to be effective in public? You better get serious in private, because your habits are casting votes. Every single day, whether you're conscious of it or not, you are either voting for your future or against it. And what people don't understand is that greatness is never built in a moment. It's built by momentum. Small disciplines, repeated actions, tiny decisions, done quietly, done consistently, done when nobody's looking. That's how legacies are built. That's how breakthroughs happen. That's how giants are made. I've seen people with more talent than discipline fade out in 5 years. I've seen people with average skill but extraordinary self-retraint dominate industries because they were willing to do the work nobody wanted to do in the times nobody wanted to do it. Discipline is a multiplier. It takes your average and gives it excellence. It takes your mediocrity and gives it mastery. But it only works if you do. Think of the most impactful people you've ever seen, not the ones who just look good for a season, but the ones who leave a mark. They didn't get there by showing off. They got there by showing up repeatedly, faithfully, without fail. They got there by making private discipline their non-negotiable standard. They understood that the platform is not the place where you learn. It's the place where you reflect what you've learned. It's not the gym, it's the game. And if you haven't trained in silence, you will get exposed in the spotlight. See, the thing about discipline is that it's not just about action, it's about identity. You don't just do disciplined things. You become a disciplined person. And once you become that person, you don't need external pressure to act. You act because it's who you are. And once your identity is locked in, consistency becomes effortless. Discipline becomes automatic because you've decided that your future is too important to leave to feeling. And when that becomes your mindset, you don't need accountability partners. You become your own accountability. I know it's hard. I know there are days when nobody understands why you're doing what you're doing. You're waking up early while others are sleeping in. You're saying no to things that everyone else calls normal. You're sacrificing comfort for character. But here's what you've got to remember. Everything you're doing in private is compounding. Every rep, every journal entry, every prayer, every rejection you bounce back from, every temptation you resist, every piece of practice, every dollar saved, every hour studied, it's stacking quietly, powerfully, invisibly. And here's what's crazy. There will come a moment when you walk into a room, speak a sentence, show your work, and people will think it's magic, but you'll know it was just math. You were adding when others were subtracting. You were sewing when others were scrolling. You were building while they were bragging. And now your results are undeniable. Because private discipline does not lie. It's like compound interest. It may not show up on day 1 or week 2 or even month 5, but give it time and it will break through the surface. Like a seed, you'll sprout. Not because you shouted, because you stayed, because you were faithful, because you had the patience to stay hidden while your roots were growing deep. And listen to me, every minute of that private practice is preparing you for public performance. Every late night, every early morning, every quiet decision to choose your future over your feelings is going to show up in the fruit. Not maybe, not someday, but always, because heaven always honors what the crowd can't see. Noise is cheap. Strength is expensive. And if you're not careful, you'll start trading the latter for the former, because it's easier to be loud than it is to be strong. We live in a world where people want to be seen more than they want to be solid. They want attention without intention. They want credit for showing up, but they haven't put in the quiet work that builds the kind of strength that doesn't break under pressure. But here's the truth. Silence builds strength. The kind of strength that doesn't need an audience to feel alive. The kind of strength that is rooted, grounded, and unshakable, not because of how it looks, but because of what it has endured without needing to make an announcement about it. There's something powerful about learning how to grow without being seen. A tree doesn't ask for applause while its roots are pushing deep into the soil. It doesn't beg for attention while its trunk is thickening year after year. It just grows quietly, steadily, with purpose. And that's what your process should look like. When you're building real strength, you don't have time to broadcast every step. You're too busy transforming, too busy learning, too busy becoming. The spotlight is seductive, but the soil is where substance is formed. And if you avoid the soil just to chase the shine, you'll come up short. Every time. Because strength that's only surface deep always snaps under stress. People confuse noise with movement. They confuse visibility with impact. Just because someone is talking doesn't mean they're building. Just because they're posting doesn't mean they're progressing. And just because they're known doesn't mean they're necessary. Strength doesn't scream. It doesn't need to. It shows up in how you respond to pressure, how you carry responsibility, how you move when the cameras are off and no one is applauding. It shows up when you choose character over clout, integrity over image, purpose over popularity. The world has convinced people that if no one sees your grind, it's not worth doing. That if no one validates your growth, it must not be happening. But you weren't called to grow for the crowd. You were called to grow for your call. You weren't called to be noticed. You were called to be necessary. And necessity is built in silence. When the phone's not ringing, when the applause is gone, when the room is empty, that's where your real foundation is formed. Not when you feel affirmed, but when you feel abandoned. Not when you feel hyped up, but when you feel hidden. There's a level of strength that's only developed in silence. The kind of strength that doesn't depend on external motivation because it's fed by internal conviction. The kind of strength that walks through rejection and doesn't lose its fire. That keeps building when no one is buying. That keeps praying when no one is listening. That keeps studying when everyone else is sleeping. That keeps saying no to distractions. Yes to discipline. Yes to development. Strength doesn't show up all at once. It's stacked over time, rep by rep, choice by choice, sacrifice by sacrifice. It's forged in the moments nobody else sees. And it's revealed in the moments nobody can ignore. And the thing about silence is that it forces you to face yourself. When you strip away the noise, the distractions, the likes, the reposts, the opinions, you're left with the real you, not the curated version, not the brand, the you that either believes in the vision or doesn't, the you that either does the work or makes excuses. And when you're silent, when you're still, when you're in that quiet place, you get to confront your weaknesses, refine your strengths, and cultivate a version of you that is so deeply rooted that nothing on the surface can shake it. People will wonder how you got so strong, so focused, so grounded. They'll ask what your secret is, thinking it was some overnight blessing or random burst of talent. But you'll know the truth. You'll know it came from the silence, from the days you showed up with no applause, from the seasons you stayed planted while others were chasing platforms, from the mornings you denied comfort for calling, from the nights you chose growth over gratification. That's where real strength is built. not from the noise of the crowd, but from the stillness of commitment. Noise fades, but strength remains. The crowd moves on, but conviction stays. If you're always chasing affirmation, you'll never be able to anchor yourself in purpose. And purpose requires silence, because in silence, you hear your assignment clearly. In silence, you sharpen your focus. In silence, you strip away what doesn't matter and double down on what does. The silence becomes sacred. It becomes the gym where you train, the forge where you're refined, the battlefield where you win the war within. So when the season comes where you feel hidden, where you feel like no one's watching, where it seems like your efforts are unnoticed and your progress is invisible, don't run from that silence. Lean into it. Let it strengthen you. Let it clarify you. Let it break you down and build you up again. Not for performance, but for purpose. Because strength that is built quietly is the kind that lasts loudly. You don't owe people an explanation. You owe God an execution. That's where most people get stuck. They keep pausing to explain, to justify, to get permission from people who were never assigned to understand their purpose in the first place. You can't run your race while constantly turning around to make sure the crowd's okay with your pace. Some of the most powerful things you'll ever do in life won't make sense to the people around you. And that's exactly why you need to stop seeking validation and start walking in obedience. Purpose doesn't wait for a vote. Vision doesn't wait for consensus. When you've been given an assignment, your job is not to explain it. It's to execute it with excellence. When you constantly feel the need to explain yourself, it's usually because you haven't fully owned the identity connected to your assignment. Once you know who you are, and more importantly, whose you are, you stop needing outside approval. You're not building based on popularity. You're building based on purpose. You're not performing for applause. You're pursuing alignment. And here's the uncomfortable truth. There will be seasons when your silence is misunderstood, when your progress is questioned, when your obedience looks like rebellion to people who have never carried the kind of vision you've been trusted with. You were not created to be understood by everybody. You were created to be obedient to your calling. And obedience always comes before explanation. Noah didn't explain the ark, he built it. David didn't explain why he was running toward Goliath with a slingshot, he just did it. Joseph didn't explain his dreams to everyone after the pit, he just lived them out. Every single time the breakthrough came not from talking about the plan, but from walking it out, step by step, with unwavering faith. If you spend your energy trying to be understood, you'll spend your life distracted. The world will always have opinions. People will always ask questions. Why are you doing it like that? Why are you working so hard? Why aren't you hanging out anymore? Why are you so focused? Why are you not settling? They want answers, but what they really want is for you to fit their version of your life. But you're not called to fit. You're called to follow. And following purpose means ignoring the noise that tries to pull you into explanation mode every time you make a move that looks different, sounds different, or feels uncomfortable to someone else. There's something sacred about building in silence, about choosing to move without broadcasting, about letting your fruit do the talking. That's what execution is. It's the quiet commitment to bring something into existence without needing a round of applause for every brick you lay. And that takes maturity. Immature builders need constant affirmation. Mature builders understand that the reward isn't in the recognition. It's in the realization of what they were born to build. And when you're truly aligned, you realize you don't have time to explain. You don't have time to debate. You don't have time to convince. Because every moment spent trying to get people on board with what God already approved is a moment lost from actually building the thing you were called to build. There are people watching you, waiting to see if you're serious, waiting to see if you'll back down, waiting to see if you'll fold under pressure. And your silence will frustrate them. Your refusal to explain will confuse them. But that's part of the process. Let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them doubt. While they're talking, you're working. While they're watching, you're growing. You are not responsible for their understanding. You are responsible for your obedience. and obedience will take you places explanation never could. The longer you wait for people to understand, the longer you delay your assignment. Some things are not meant to be explained until they've been executed. Some visions can't be described with words. They have to be revealed through results. So keep your head down, keep showing up, keep refining, keep becoming, and understand that every time you obey in silence, you're building credibility with the only audience that really matters. Every time you act without needing to be seen, you're aligning yourself with the deeper calling that doesn't beg for attention, it demands results. People will always have opinions, but they don't have your instructions. They didn't get your download. They weren't in the room when the vision hit your spirit. They didn't hear the whispers in the dark when you were at your lowest being pulled by something greater. They didn't see the nights you cried, the sacrifices you made, the times you almost quit but didn't. So why would you hand them the power to define your process? Why would you pause your progress just to explain your purpose to someone who's not called to carry it with you? The truth is, most people aren't even listening to understand. They're listening to judge, to compare, to critique. They're trying to measure your blueprint by their broken ruler. And if you let them, they'll pull you into a cycle of people-pleasing that kills your momentum. But when you operate from conviction, you don't need confirmation. When you walk by faith, you don't need feedback. You just move. You just build. You just obey. Because when the fruit comes, the silence will make sense. When the results show up, the questions will quiet down. And when your assignment is fulfilled, there won't be anything left to explain. We love the mountaintop moments, the big wins, the shining stages, the highlight reels. But what we often fail to recognize is that real value, lasting, unshakable, soul-deep value is built in the valley. Not on the stage, not under the lights, not when everyone is watching. It's in the low places, the quiet seasons, the places where no one claps, no one cheers, and no one even knows your name. That's where your value is formed. Not the kind of value that's based on popularity or performance, but the kind of value that makes you unmovable, no matter what life throws at you. You don't find your strength when everything is going your way. You discover who you really are when it's not. When the money is tight, when the door gets slammed, when the dream looks distant, when you're still working, still praying, still pushing, and still showing up. There's something about the valley that breaks the ego but builds the spirit. It strips away the fluff. It removes the applause. It silences the noise. It takes you into a place where the only voice that matters is God's. And in that place, he doesn't just improve you, he transforms you. You thought you needed the mountaintop to become somebody, but it's in the valley where your identity gets forged. When you can't see your way out, but you choose to walk anyway. When nothing looks like it's working, but you keep putting in the reps. When the fire gets hotter, and instead of running, you decide to stand still and let it refine you. That's where real value is built. Because that's where endurance is built. That's where character is built. That's where vision is tested. Not in the light, but in the dark. You see, the valley doesn't destroy you. It defines you. It shows you what you've got on the inside. It exposes what needs to be healed, what needs to be grown, what needs to be surrendered. It humbles you, but it also equips you, because if you can lead in the valley, if you can stay faithful when everything looks broken, then you can be trusted with the weight of success when it comes. Too many people want the blessing without the burden, but God doesn't give elevation without preparation. And preparation happens in places that don't feel good, but are absolutely necessary. There's something powerful about learning to keep your hands moving in the valley. When the emotions are heavy, when the vision is cloudy, when the encouragement is non-existent, and still you write, you build, you train, you give, you speak, you serve. Not because it feels good, but because you know who you are and what you're called to. That's not hype. That's maturity. And it's that kind of maturity that makes you unstoppable when the spotlight finally shows up. Because when you've been trained in the valley, you don't fall apart on the mountain. You've already fought through storms. You've already stood through fire. So now, when the pressure increases, you don't shrink, you rise. But don't be surprised when your valley season is misunderstood. People will assume you're losing because they can't see the internal wins. They'll question your direction, your pace, your choices. They'll wonder why you're not shining yet, why you're not posting the proof, why you're not keeping up with their version of success. But what they don't understand is that your silence isn't failure, it's formation. While they chase platforms, you're building roots. While they chase attention, you're building endurance. And what they don't realize is that when your season shifts, you won't just be visible, you'll be valuable, you'll be weighty, you'll be trusted. Because the valley built something in you that performance never could. You also learn to listen in the valley. When everything's quiet and the distractions fall away, your ears become sharper. You start to hear things you never noticed when the volume was high. You hear your doubts more clearly, but you also hear your faith. You hear your fear, but you also hear your purpose calling out from the core of your being. The valley becomes the place where you don't just hear God, you learn to trust him. Not because you got what you wanted, but because he showed you who you are. And that is far more valuable than any platform you could ever stand on, because the platform can be taken away, but identity built in the valley stays with you no matter what. People spend their whole lives trying to avoid the valley. They run from discomfort. They medicate their disappointment. They scroll through their suffering, but you can't escape the process and still expect the promise. The value isn't in the avoiding, it's in the enduring. Every great leader you admire had to walk through a low place before they could stand in a high one. Every anointing carries a price. Every vision demands a sacrifice. The question is, will you lean in when it hurts? Will you stay planted when it's dry? Will you stay faithful when it's frustrating? Because if you can hold on there, if you can grow there, if you can stay committed when nothing is clapping for you, nothing is validating you, nothing is applauding you, that's when you'll come out with something that can't be shaken. The valley is not the place where your dreams die. It's the place where your foundation is laid. And if the foundation is deep, the future can be tall. The deeper you go in the hidden place, the higher you can rise in the revealed place. That's why the valley matters. That's why it's not a setback, it's a setup. It's not punishment, it's positioning. You're not being buried, you're being planted. And planted things don't stay hidden forever. They rise, they bloom, they bear fruit, but only because they were willing to stay in the soil long enough to be developed. Discipline is the bridge between your desire and your destiny. It's not the motivation you feel on your best day that determines your success. It's the decisions you make on your worst day. Anybody can act right when everything is easy, when the sun is shining, when the bank account is full, and the opportunities are flowing. But discipline is about what you do when it's raining, when it's quiet, when it's hard, when nobody's looking and no one's clapping. It's the muscle that builds in the shadows. It's the choice to move when you don't feel like moving, to show up when comfort tells you to sit down, to speak truth when silence would be easier, to keep becoming when quitting looks more attractive. People are always looking for secrets, shortcuts, and hacks. They want a strategy that removes struggle. They want a formula that works without the fire. But there is no elevation without consistency and no excellence without commitment. Discipline is not an emotion. It's a decision. It's not about feeling right. It's about doing right, even when it's inconvenient. It's waking up early when your body craves sleep, studying while others are relaxing, investing when everyone else is consuming, building when no one else believes. Discipline is what you do in private that eventually shows up in public. It's the quiet, behind-the-scenes decisions that create the visible breakthroughs that people think happened overnight. And here's the part that most people don't want to hear. Discipline will offend your comfort. It will confront your excuses. It will challenge your patterns. It will demand that you trade what's easy for what's essential. That's why most people don't stay disciplined, because they keep trying to protect their preferences instead of honoring their purpose. But you can't stay comfortable and become great. You can't indulge every feeling and still fulfill your assignment. Purpose will stretch you. Calling will cost you. And if you're not willing to crucify convenience, you'll never experience the resurrection of your destiny. There are going to be days when the process feels pointless, when you're putting in work and seeing no results, when it looks like your discipline is being wasted. But that's the lie. Discipline is never wasted, it's stored. Every rep, every choice, every small yes compounds over time. And just because you can't see the fruit today doesn't mean the root system isn't growing. Farmers don't dig up the seed just because they don't see a sprout in 24 hours. They trust the process, they water it, they guard it, they wait on it, because they understand that the fruit is always on the other side of consistency. Discipline also trains your identity. Every time you show up, you're reinforcing the truth that you are not your feelings, You are your follow-through. You're not a slave to impulse. You're a steward of intention. You're not tossed around by emotion. You are grounded in execution. And the more you walk in that, the more your internal world aligns with your external results. You stop relying on hype to get started. You stop depending on perfect conditions to do the work. You start showing up because that's who you are. You're a builder, a finisher, a doer. And the discipline begins to rewire your mindset so that hard becomes holy and delay becomes development. People may admire your success one day, but what they won't see is the 100 mornings you got up before sunrise, the nights you turned down distraction to study your craft, the meals you skipped to invest in your future, the parties you declined to stay focused, the battles you fought in your own mind to not give up. They'll call it talent. They'll say it was luck, but you'll know the truth. You'll know it was discipline, the invisible labor that birthed visible results, the daily dying to lesser desires so you could become who you were created to be. The truth is, every breakthrough is built on the back of boring, not glamorous, not flashy, just boring consistency, doing what needs to be done even when you don't feel like doing it. And that's where most people lose. They're not willing to be bored long enough to be great. They quit because they don't feel inspired. They abandon the process because it's not exciting anymore. But if you can learn to find joy in the mundane, to find purpose in repetition, to find strength in the ordinary, that's when you become dangerous. That's when you stop being a dreamer and start being a deliverer. Discipline gives you authority, not just over results, but over yourself, over your mind, over your habits, over your decisions. And when you learn to lead yourself, you won't be so easily led by your circumstances. You won't be manipulated by your moods. You won't need everything to be perfect to move forward. You'll have that internal fire, that unshakable commitment, that immovable resolve that says, I don't feel it today, but I'm doing it anyway. I'm tired, but I'm showing up. I'm discouraged, but I'm not stopping because what I'm building is bigger than how I feel. You can tell who has discipline by how they move when no one is watching. Do they still show up? Still train? Still serve? Still learn? Still give? That's the test, because the world celebrates performance, but God honors persistence. And the ones who win long term are not always the most talented, they're the most consistent. The ones who kept grinding when no one believed. The ones who kept building when the applause died down. The ones who didn't wait for permission to become powerful. They just decided daily to master the little things, and eventually the little things multiplied into something undeniable. Discipline is the difference between people who talk and people who build, people who start and people who finish, people who wish and people who win. And once you understand that discipline is a form of freedom, everything changes, because you're no longer a prisoner to procrastination, to excuses, to distraction. You're free to execute, free to create, free to move with purpose, not emotion. And that kind of freedom doesn't just change your results, it changes your life. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. That's why building yourself in private matters more than branding yourself in public. You can wear the look, say the words, post the quotes, and mimic the moves, but eventually who you really are will leak through the image. That's why your most important work isn't what people see, it's what they don't. It's the thoughts you shape, the habits you cultivate, the beliefs you confront, the wounds you heal, the disciplines you protect, the integrity you guard. That's the real foundation of greatness. Not popularity, not visibility, not applause, but character, alignment, congruence. Because when your internal world is whole, your external world becomes stable. So many people are grinding for exposure, but skipping over development. They want a platform before they've built the person. They want results without refinement. They want influence without identity. And what they don't realize is that if you rise too fast without roots, the very thing that elevates you will expose you. The pressure of visibility will reveal the cracks you refused to fix in private. The weight of influence will magnify the inconsistencies you ignored when no one was watching. So if you want to be ready for what you're asking for, you've got to become it before. You receive it. You got to embody it before you announce it. You got to build yourself into the kind of person who can carry the very thing you're praying for. Real growth is not glamorous. It's not sexy. It doesn't always feel inspiring. Sometimes it looks like wrestling with your mindset, forgiving people who won't apologize, confronting insecurities you've hidden behind achievement, shutting your mouth when your pride wants to defend itself, staying silent when gossip feels justified, choosing discipline when indulgence seems easier, owning your mistakes when no one's forcing you to. That's the real work. The deep, often invisible work that transforms you from the inside out. And it's not fast. It's not loud. It's not applauded, but it's because the inner world you ignore will sabotage the outer world you build. You don't build power by pretending to be powerful. You build it by becoming unshakable. And that kind of strength doesn't come from pretending you have it all together. It comes from being honest about where you're still broken. It comes from laying your weaknesses on the altar and letting God meet you in the places where you feel most unqualified. You don't have to fake wholeness to be effective. You just have to be willing to heal. Because when you start healing, you stop leaking. You stop bleeding on people who didn't cut you. You stop sabotaging opportunities with fear. You stop misinterpreting feedback as rejection. You stop running from growth and start running toward it, because now you know who you are without the mask. People keep asking how to attract better relationships, better opportunities, better environments, but that's the wrong question. You don't attract what you ask for, you attract what you're aligned with. So if you're still attracting chaos, drama, inconsistency, instability, don't just look around, look within. What in you is still in agreement with dysfunction? What unhealed part of you keeps accepting less? What belief are you still holding that tells you this is all you deserve? Because once you grow past it, you won't even tolerate what you used to chase. Your appetite will change. Your standards will shift. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you've finally become aligned with your assignment. It's easy to build for the camera, to curate an image, to chase relevance. But that's not the assignment. The assignment is to build something real, something lasting, something that stands when trends change, when applause fades, when followers unfollow, when the world stops clapping. Because legacy isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadow. Built in the decisions no one sees, the integrity no one praises, the standards no one understands, the pruning seasons that don't look like progress, but are setting the stage for the kind of impact that can't be manufactured. When you build yourself quietly, you become dangerous, not because you're loud, but because you're grounded. Not because you're flashy, but because you're focused. You're no longer chasing validation because you're rooted in identity. You don't need to prove anything because you're already aligned with purpose. You don't fold under pressure because pressure doesn't scare someone who's already been refined in private. You're not intimidated by competition because you know your assignment can't be copied. You're not worried about the timing because you trust the preparation. That's the kind of person who attracts what lasts, because now you're not just talented, you're trustworthy. And trust is the currency of real influence.